So hi, I'm Joanne Armitage. Helen Thornham, my co-investigator, is also here. She'll probably butt in at points and disrupt me as per usual. And our colleague and fellow co-investigator, Chris Birchall, is unable to join us today, but sends his very best. So we're all based in the Department of Media and Communication at University of Leeds. Equally Digital, Digitally Equal is built on an AHRC project, which is a GCRF network grant that was supposed to start in January and was obviously in March overwhelmed by COVID. Now, this project was looking at developing sustainable and equitable projects, working with groups in Latin America and looking at how free and open source software was being used and created by different organizations to work with very vulnerable communities. Now, obviously, this work's been very implicated by COVID and the shift to working through distances. And here, lots of digital inequalities have arisen in relation to who can access technology, who can be online, who can work and who can be worked with. So our conversations with the group started, we were trying to talk about capitalism and neoliberalism, and actually the groups were talking about violence and struggle when we first began sort of planning the projects. So we saw this space through the Not Equal network to bring some of this work back to the UK, and also some space to kind of think through, what COVID's doing to kind of the practices of these organizations. So the project was developed in partnership with 4 cooperatives across 4 different countries. So the first is Space 2 in Leeds, which Helen's worked with extensively through other projects. And they do lots of kind of arts practice in the community for sort of social equality. We're working with Espacio Nixso, this nice orange logo in Buenos Aires. And they do amazing work repurposing trash to do electronics projects with vulnerable communities. And I went and visited them in April 2019 and was just sort of blown away by how much they do with such little financial support. Another group we're working with is C-Innova, based in Bogota, Colombia. This is a more kind of professionalized group who are working on co-creation platforms with universities such as MIT, but also kind of local universities, and working with kind of vulnerable groups to develop sort of different infrastructure and sort of open up job possibilities. And then Media Lab MX, which is more of a hackerspace based in Mexico City. So with these groups, technology is used and implemented in very different ways. And each cooperative is looking at new ways to continue their work and continue engaging with communities, but through this unprecedented change. So together, we're looking to collectively evaluate these practices and methods to develop shareable and collaborative practices fit for our current global condition. So what we build will be shared through the different community groups and kind of used as kind of a space for testing and reflecting on these different prototypes that we'll build. And we're going to, through this, ask how the lived necessity of digital engagement has been reimagined, and how that has reimagined issues of inequality and social justice. And this is something we're finding really difficult to unpick with the group, and something that I think will unfold, like when we ask, how has inequality changed? People are struggling to answer that question right now. I think there's something about this lived moment of struggle that we're all experiencing. So our central aim is to critically evaluate existing digital technology infrastructure and its potentials for facilitating the kinds of work these organizations are doing. The groups all work with vulnerable communities, But what constitutes vulnerability, equality, and social change is very different. We want to know how, within already complex digital social structures, inequality, as algorithmic, infrastructural, social, and geopolitical, is now being renegotiated through and with technologies. And we want to understand these processes of negotiation in the hope that such an understanding will help us better think through and build for equality. So the groups that we're working with, some have built platforms for collaboration, like C-Innova has built this platform Retos that they collaborate through. And it's really interesting because they found that they've built this like really swanky platform, but they're having to do a lot of their work on WhatsApp because that's what people in the community are using. So there's something really interesting about building these kinds of systems for equality, but actually having to rely on Facebook and sort of hegemonic technology corporations. Other groups, such as Space 2, have only turned to technology through necessity. So they're having to work with technology because they can't work with people in the same way. And groups like Space 2 have actually started becoming more sort of, you know, instead of delivering workshops on arts, they're delivering food packages in the community. So what they do has really, really changed. Groups like Espacio Nixso and Media Lab MX have long used technology as a way of thinking, of resisting existing infrastructure and speaking back to it. So we want to understand better how COVID has changed or shifted what digital activism is in these organizations and how it's impacted their practices. So we've been looking at what technologies groups are using, how they are hacking them or building their own, the work they can do and the work they can't do, and how the promises of technology measure against their needs, expectations, and practices. So the project will be conducted through interviews using Jitsi and other video conferencing software, through collated autoethnographic materials, and through practice and slow, shareable, tangible prototypes. We're conducting interviews at the moment to understand the context in which the groups are working and how this has shifted through the pandemic. And we're interested in how they're collaborating and what is missing from these communications and what is present. So through this, we'll prototype an autoethnographic app or tool for the groups to work with to document some of these embodied experiences that are harder to communicate through existing platforms. So this is going to be quite an experimental app, I think. So yeah, and then we'll move to a stage of like hosting workshops and sort of building slow prototype responses that are quite lo-fi to the specific issues that arise from this kind of collection phase. So yeah, that's our kind of current work. And our next steps are to sort of bring that together and think about what we can build and what we can do. And what also we'll be looking at what groups are using and what groups have already built and how that might be shared with other organizations. So how might Space 2 working in Leeds use a platform based in Colombia to kind of engage with the community in different ways, and how might that shift how that platform's used and its logics, and what can that platform do? So yeah, I don't know if you've got anything to add, Helen. I think I've pretty much run up to the 10 minutes.